Hello and welcome to another Writer's Showcase, everybody. Always a pleasure to have you here. We have some new face, one new face, actually, but we will be bringing them in slowly. First, allow me to welcome my running co-host, Neph Champion. And
行くわよ来世の試練よ
oh, whoops. Neph is not here yet, unfortunately. Didn't think she would be there. Alrighty. Well, we will wait for Neph to come on. Let me bring on some more people. Please welcome the consummate professional, Carl Saylor.
Hey, folks.
Hey. And we also have an official entrance for our friend Mr. Akos. So here we go.
Freeze! You're under arrest. You have the right to the remains of a silent attorney. If you cannot afford one, tough noogies. You can make one phone call. I recommend Trilogy 976-555, love. Do you understand these rights as I have explained them to you, bunk? No. Then I can't arrest you!
I asked you not to start before I got back!
Sorry. Carl arrived, so cool.
I wasn't expecting you to be here until, like, a lot later.
That's Tarek. So,
okay.
Sorry. My bad. I apologize. But anyway, this will be like, since Mr. Spark the Light Bulb, I don't know of anything better, so there we go.
That's a pretty good one, all things considered.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're on a Narnia kick this week, aren't we?
Yeah, I just barely took a lot of clips from that final battle, so I'm happy. Yeah.
Next week I gotta make sure that my my fan fiction is ready for next week so I can show it off.
Sweet. Alrighty. Let me say some highs in the chat. Welcome, Becca, as ever. Like the Stormlight reference. Welcome for the first time to Kristen Logie, who might be Gringe. I don't know, but I love the Mistborn symbol. Very, very nice. And Tarek should be coming soon. To the Writer Showcase, but thank you for watching, buddy. Anyway, so on the so Carl, you're here for 2 hours. Spark, you're here for 2 hours. Okay, so then how about we'll just go counterclockwise, or clockwise, I mean, and we'll just start with Neph, go to Carl, and then Akos.
It's been a while since I started. Are you sure?
I'd say first time for everything, but apparently it isn't. It's just been a long time.
Yeah, it has. Okay, so I'm going to be reading the rest of the second chapter of Wolfpack. And I believe when I last read this, I ended on working on the ranch with the goats was going to be murder on his nose. He just knew it. Okay, so oh no. Right. Link really didn't want to be here, but according to Wolfie, his papa, he needed to be here. Link grimaced as he pulled himself out of bed and went to pull some clothes out of his dresser. It was one of the smaller green tunics that had once belonged to his great-grandfather. He pulled it on, along with a pair of simple trousers. Next was a set of simple boots, which he pulled on and left the house. Link slid down the ladder and laughed as his little sister licked his hair. Epona, stop it! You can easily pull my hair out, he scolded his horse. Good morning, sister. Fado seemed to be confused when Epona immediately backed off, bumping Link's chest in greeting. Link vaulted onto Epona's back and settled himself. We are ready, Fado, Link said, giving the older boy a nod. Epona and I will meet you at the ranch. Fado nodded slowly as he backed away. Later, Link, he left the half-feral teen. Link gave a wolf-like snort as he laughed with his sister. Fado frustrates me, he said, casually, as Epona began walking down the road into the village proper. Epona snorted, and Link thought she sounded amused. For a few moments, Link and Epona gazed down the lane leading out of the village and back to the barren woods. Epona lowered her head and made a sad sound. Link patted her shoulder comfortingly. I know, I miss Wolfie too, even though it's only been a week. He gently nudged his little sister into a walk and turned her towards the road leading to Ordon village proper. Maybe once the rest are used to us being here, they will allow us to venture back into the woods. Ah, Link! How are you settling in? Sarah, the owner of Sarah's Sundries, called from where she was opening her shop. Well enough, Miss Sarah, Link called back, already developing the country twang all the villagers had in their voices. Where are you headed, Haunch? Sarah's husband asked. Fado's parents have asked that I help them with the goats, Link replied slowly. They said something about breaking Epona's attack in return, but I don't know what that means, he trailed off. Sarah and Hodge traded a look. You tell him, Hodge, Sarah said. He loves that horse and doesn't want to see her hurt. Hodge nodded to Sarah. I know what that means, Link, and it would not hurt Epona. Breaking a horse attack means getting them used to wearing a saddle and a bridle. But I don't need any of that, Link replied with a shake of his head. I've always rode Epona bareback, and she's never given me any problems either. He preferred his sister the way she was. Sarah and Haunch let him go. Epona came to another stop when they noticed Russell practicing with a live blade. Link grimaced. It was just another reminder that his wooden toy was now too small for him to practice with. Russell stopped and turned around. Oh, good morning, Link. Where are you off to? Fado's parents have asked for some help on the farm with the goats, Link replied, his grimace turning into a frown. I don't want to. The son of the goats makes me ill, he admitted finally. You don't need to help on the farm, Link, Russell said. But I'm no freeloader, Link growled. I don't want or need charity, especially from a village that's as small as this one. He nudged Epona a little too sharply and made a sound of protest as she lifted her front feet. Link yelped, holding onto his sister's barrel with his legs, and clung to her neck with his arms. Epona, I'm sorry, he whined, as her front feet met the ground hard and she tossed her head, giving him a glare with one of her deep brown eyes. Didn't mean to be so rough, he pouted as he sat up again. You sure Epona never gives you any trouble? Uli, Russell's wife, asked as she came up to them. her stomach heavy with their first child. Nope. That was Epona telling me to be more gentle with my commands, Link replied, blushing at being caught. So, it had been an accident. Russell watched the pair of boy and horse for a moment. How about you come to me after you're done at the ranch? I can teach you a few things. Link blinked down at the round-eared human. Teach me? He asked. Teach me what? I can see from the way you hold yourself, Link, Russell said, that you are a fighter. Let me cultivate that. Link bit his lip as he thought about it. If I do this, will you let me spend time outside the village? He asked. I'm the only Hylian here. I feel a little out of place. As long as you don't go farther than the Farron Spring, I'm sure we can allow it, Russell said, rubbing at his chin. Let me talk to Mayor Bow about that first, and I will get back to you with an answer. The half-feral 13-year-old grinned. Thank you, sir. He nudged Epona, much more gently this time, and Epona trotted off towards Ordon Ranch. The possibility of getting to visit Wolfie and get out of the village was too good an offer to resist. Once he was out of sight of the other villagers, Link sighed and tugged on Epona's mane to get her to stop. I know Papa said this would be our home, sis, and it feels like it could be. Everyone's real nice, but... He slipped off her back and hugged her head when his sister nosed him questioningly. Right now, it feels as if we're intruding. Epona pushed at him playfully and Link laughed. I know I'm being silly, he pouted, pushing her nose away playfully. I just really miss Wolfie. Epona nodded, waiting patiently as Link pulled himself back up onto her back. I know I should let you decide instead of just answering for you, Link paused. But Epona, do you want to get a saddle and bridle? Epona seemed to think about it as she started walking up the hill again. You don't have to answer now, just tell me whenever. Link was nearly crying by the time he and Epona finished putting the goats away for the night. All he could smell was the stench of the animals and their droppings. He could not smell anything else. He almost felt as if he was partly blind. Are you all right, Link? Russell asked as Epona walked by. Link looked up, revealing his watering eyes. Russell? He asked. Are you sick? Russell asked. Might as well be, Link grumbled. I can't smell anything other than the goats. Russell nodded gently. Russell nodded, gently pulling Link off Epona's back, much to Epona's distress, and called to Uli through an open window. Uli, get some tea ready. Epona reached forward and took the back of Link's shirt into her teeth, trying to pull him back. Russell, sir, I'll be fine, Link tried to protest. He tried to pull out of the man's grip and get back on Epona, but he could not. Nonsense! I can tell you how my talk with Mayor Bow went while you were recovering, Russell said with a wide smile. Link froze in indecision. On one hand, he was not comfortable. On the other, he'd get to visit Wolfie, as long as it didn't interfere with the work he would end up doing in Ordon. Okay. Epona let go with a huff and a stomp of her right forehoof. Come on, Epona, don't be like that, Link cajoled, pulling her towards the house. Link knew his eyes made most of the villagers in Ordon uncomfortable. They reminded everyone that he was a half-feral child. He knew this because he could hear them whispering about the wolf howls that could sometimes be heard. Some of those howls belonged to him, and some to Wolfie. Link knew that he shouldn't be howling. He knew it, but he couldn't help howling on the days when he felt unbearably lonely. He had not yet built any lasting bonds to Ordon, and it was fairly obvious. It wasn't that he wasn't trying either. He was. He'd noticed that Uli wasn't the only pregnant woman in the village. though he wasn't sure if Sarah knew it herself just yet. He'd also noticed that Jaggle and Perion, whom he had yet to meet, had a child around a year old, maybe a little older. He hadn't been asked to babysit yet. Not that Link blamed them for not asking. He was a wild, half-grown pup that they were not sure they could trust yet. He'd seen the baby, but not been allowed close. Link knew that he'd have a chance to prove himself eventually. He just had to be patient. Link chuckled as he watched Colin, Tallow, and Beth play. It'd been 4 years and he'd found his place in the village of Ordon. He minded the children, learned how to fight with a sword from Russell, and sometimes helped fodder with the goats. He was still the half-feral teen he'd been when he'd gotten here. Link had just gotten really good at hiding it. Link, do you ever get a strange feeling of sadness as twilight falls? Russell asked. They were both sitting at the edge of the Faron Spring. They say that it's the only time that their world intersects with ours. The only time we can feel the lingering regrets of spirits who have left our world. What does that mean? Link asked in confusion. He'd never felt sadness at the hour of twilight. Sure, he'd heard the sadness and regret in Wolfie's voice the few times his papa had howled during the hour of twilight, but he'd not felt it himself. Never mind. I have a favor to ask of you, Link. Russell got up, brushing himself off. Mayor Bo has asked that I deliver a gift to the royal family of Hyrule the day after tomorrow. I was wondering if you would like to go in my place. Link blinked. Go back to Hyrule? Could he even do that? Link felt his throat close on him, and he could only stare up at his human mentor. He wasn't even sure he wanted to go back. Russell must have taken his silence for confusion. You've never been to Hyrule, have you? Link looked away into the water of the sacred spring. Should he say that he had been? That's where he'd come from? He couldn't speak, even if he wanted to. In the kingdom of Hyrule, there's a great castle, and around it is Castletown, a community far bigger than our little village. Russell went on. You should look at it with your own eyes. Link looked down and away, catching sight of the golden pelt flashing in the underbrush. Wolfie was watching them, waiting for Russell to leave, likely, so that they could spend a little time together. It's getting late. We should head back to the village, Russell continued. I will talk with the mayor about this matter. Link nodded, staying seated. I'd like to stay a little longer, if I may, Link signed. I will wait for you and Epona at the bridge, then, Russell agreed, as he left the sacred clearing. Link grinned to himself, not looking up until he saw the white paws of the huge wolf that had looked after him. Wolfie, he said hoarsely, as the wolf lay down next to him. I saw how your throat closed, Twilight. What's wrong? Wolfie asked, pressing his nose to Link's neck. Russell thinks I should go see Hyrule, Link replied, hugging Wolfie's neck. I want to, but you are afraid, Wolfie said. Some chosen of furore I am, Link curled in on himself. Wolfie chuckled. Oh, my little Twilight, furore is the goddess of courage, not fearlessness. I thought those were the same thing, Link grumbled, as Wolfie began to groom his hair. They are not, Wolfie replied. You should go. You need to. Link looked up, meeting Wolfie's single red eye. Then I will go. Wolfie smiled. Link's eyes widened when he saw that there was a cloud of something over the Faron Woods. There seemed to be no way in. Link knew he needed to get into and through the woods somehow. Ilya and the children had been taken by monsters. His papa, Wolfie, was also in there somewhere, and Link did not know what to do. He took several steps backward when a huge hand came out of the cloud and pulled him into it. Link struggled for a moment, trying to make the hand let go of him when he was dropped to the ground. His body and the triangles on his left hand seemed to react to the twilight around him, and Link began to scream as he felt his bones start to twist and break, his pain scream becoming a howl of pain as fur sprouted from his skin and his transformation finished. Then Link collapsed on the ground, unconscious. And the chapter is finished.
Very nice. Good interpersonal conflict there. Very interesting.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I don't have much feedback since I'm not a Zelda fan. Like, I have never, ever played a Zelda game in the entirety of my existence on this earth.
Oh no, it's fine, it's fine.
I got halfway through Oracle of the Seasons on GBA. That's my full experience with Zelda.
Yeah.
The only Zelda memory I have is getting chased by chickens.
They're called cuckoos. But yeah, they are. They can be terrifying.
Yeah. Cuckoo, cuckoo. Alrighty.
Alright.
Oh, hey, Blue's here!
Yay,
Hello, Blue.
Hi,
Well-
Blue.
So I guess it's little girl Blue rather than little boy Blue.
Maybe. Thank you, Becca.
Yep. Alright, so am I up next?
Yep, you are indeed up next.
Alright. So if you were on the stream 2 weeks ago, you may have remembered from my offering that week that Lord Stolos is holding a war council. And today we will see the first part of it. The scene is a bit too long, I'll have to cut it in the middle, but we will see the first part of said war council and learn what is to come. His Excellency Lord Wingate, High Admiral Auroran Royal Airborne Fleet. It would take some time to get used to seeing that title applied to his name. Lord Wingate set the name card back down on the table and sat down, gently declining the lone wave girl who scurried over from the other side of the chamber to offer him a fresh cup of tea. As head of the fleet, he was to the immediate left of the seat reserved for His Excellency Lord Stolos, Lord Protector of Aurora. Lord Wingate looked closer. Was there really a need to include Lord twice in his title? For that matter, wasn't it supposed to be Lord Protector of the Realm? He shrugged. The office was less than a day old. There'd be plenty of time to hammer out the details later on. Lord Wingate glanced around the rest of the table to take in the other name cards. There was still 15 minutes before the meeting was due to start. Well, almost all the seats were empty. Lord Harlock, as head of the army, was to be seated directly opposite Lord Wingate, of course. The army and fleet officers followed in descending order by seniority, the nobility after them, and the civilian personnel finally tucked away at the foot of the table. Fairly standard arrangement for a meeting. And of course, if the seats are arranged by seniority, Lord Wingate realized, then that means... He got up as calmly as he could, walked exactly 2 paces down the table, and picked up the name card. Sure enough, it belonged to Vice Admiral Baron Rockport. Lord Wingate did not need to look at the next name card down to know that it belonged to Rear Admiral the Lord Malden. With a groan, Lord Wingate moved Rockport's card 1 space to the right, and then 1 more, so as not to leave poor old Vice Admiral Gowland trapped between the true firebrands. Besides, Lord Wingate had no great desire to have Lord Bundwick at his side. My lord? The lieutenant spoke up from the other side of the room where he was setting up his typing machine. Is something amiss with the seating arrangements? Go get yourself something from the commissary, girl, Lord Wingate ordered, and the wave girl made a hasty curtsy and slipped into the corridor beyond. As soon as the door closed behind her, Lord Wingate beckoned the lieutenant over to him. Did you set out these name cards yourself? I did, my lord, the young man said, according to rank, seniority, and social precedence. Lieutenant, I sincerely hope that you will never need to use this information ever again. But in the future, Rear Admiral the Lord Malden and Vice Admiral Rockport are never to be seated next to each other. Do you understand? But surely, seniority is... I do not give a scuttering fuck about seniority, Lord Wingate hissed. I will not have those two idiots glowering at each other for the next... God knows how many longer this meeting is going to take. In the future, they are going to be kept at least 2 spaces apart, and preferably out of each other's direct line of sight. Do I make myself clear? Yes, my lord, the lieutenant said, making a frantic salute. As the young man quickly returned to his typing machine, the door opened, and Arthur Hanauer strode into the chamber. Morning, my lord, Hanauer grumbled. Bottom of the table, as usual. Sorry, Hanauer, you know how it is, Lord Wingate shrugged. The common man groaned and trudged to the far end of the meeting hall. The Hanauer Shipwright Group was responsible for building and maintaining nearly every single ship in the fleet, but since Arthur himself held neither military rank nor noble title, the rules of social precedence invariably left him with the worst seat at the table. Another strike yesterday, Hanauer said as he sat down. It's the welders this time. Lord Wingate nodded. So that was why the new ships kept getting delayed. How bad does it look? Bad, Hanauer said. We could be in for a long one. Can you replace the workers? Not easily, Hanauer said. I brought on a few strike breakers before I left, but it wasn't enough to completely replace the team. And training up new welders is going to take weeks. More delays. And just at the time when the fleet can least afford them. I'll be sure to raise the issue, Lord Wingate assured him. More people trickled in as the turning of the hours drew nearer. George Butler, the fleet's chief of supply, entered and took the second worst seat at the table. Unlike Hanauer, his previous army service afforded him a measure of respect. Richard Walker, Army Chief of Supply, took the third worst seat at the table, thanks to the peerage he'd purchased a few years back. A fact which clearly irked the acting Secretary of the Treasury, Baron Lawrence Putney, in the next prominent seat. Lords Blackpool and Bundwick arrived together, each one trying to outboast the other, as was typical for the two of them. Lord Newton greeted Lord Wingate with a quick smile as he took his place. Lord Harlock and his generals arrived all together, doubtless a show of unity on Harlock's part. Mercifully, Rockport and Malden arrived separately. Finally, just as the bells of the Dawn Palace tolled the hour, Lord Stolos himself arrived. As he entered the meeting hall, Lord Harlock and his entire staff stood up with a single motion, as would be expected of junior officers in a briefing when a superior entered the room. Another show of unity, Lord Wingate thought sullenly as he rose from his own seat. Following his lead, the rest of the fleet personnel got to their feet, with the civilians awkwardly following suit at the end of the table. Lord Wingate's eyes met Lord Harlock, who responded with just the hint of a smirk. Finally, Lord Stolos reached the head of the table, thoroughly confused as to why everyone was suddenly standing up. Officers, my lords, gentlemen, fellow Aurorans. Permit me a few words before we get down to business. I'm not going to tell you how to do your jobs. You are professionals, and I trust that. I shall be asking penetrating questions to get to the matter of things, but on the whole, I fully expect to defer to your expertise more often than not. However, it is my charge to decide in the end what exactly must be done. The minutiae of operations are your domain. Mine is that of the larger goals. And the largest goal of all for the months and years to come is this. We shall defeat Hadvar. Lord Stolos paused for a moment, probably to see how the assembly received his intentions. Nobody seemed especially impressed. Allow me to make myself clearer, Lord Stolos continued. We shall not simply check their armies in open battle. We shall not simply drive them a few hundred kilometers to the west. We shall not simply position our forces to threaten Illyria and then spend the next 6 years trying to force a favorable armistice while they regroup. That last point was accompanied by a smoldering glare that swept across the table and then fizzled out when he realized that the general responsible for that particular stratagem had been dead for nearly 15 years. We shall destroy Hadvar utterly. It is my intention to raise an army greater than any the Sand has ever fielded before, and with it to grind the western hordes into dust under the boot heel of Auroran industrial supremacy, and having so done, to break them into pieces so that they may never again rise to give threat to Aurora. That is our goal. Nothing less than the complete destruction and disassembly of Hadvar as a political entity. And I expect all of you and all of your subordinates and the organizations you lead to apply your knowledge, strength, and resources towards this ultimate end. Let us begin. And with that, Lord Stolos finally took his seat, followed by the entire table. Are there any pressing issues that stand out before we proceed? Yes, Lord Blackpool spoke up timidly. I don't suppose there is any possibility that you might be convinced to reconsider. I mean, the economic arguments of... No! Lord Stolos cut the man off sharply. This is something that should have been seen to a long time ago. We have been rolling that stone uphill for far too long, and the bill has only been ratcheting up higher and higher. It is long past time to pay what is due. Yes, of course, I understand completely, my Lord Protector. Lord Blackpool muttered his assent. Now then, Lord Stolos continued, in the absence of any substantive objections, let us start with you, my Lord Harlock. How stands the army? We're going to need more, Lord Harlock said, clearly unimpressed with Lord Stolos' grandstanding. More of what? Everything, Harlock said. More rifles, more bullets, more heavy guns and shells, more uniforms, more boots, more tents, more cookpots and water canteens, more dried beans and ration cakes, more bandages and medical supplies, more river barges and horse wagons to haul everything. He paused for breath. And most of all, more men. Lord Stolos nodded toward Lords Newton and Richard Walker, the other men in charge of Auroran war production. I'm certain our domestic industries can rise to the challenge of keeping our troops in supply. As to troop increases, I'm confident your own recruiters can fill the ranks. You may rest assured that the Royal Treasury shall spare no expense to... You don't understand, Lord Harlock interrupted. Army presently stands at less than 50,000 men, and the fleet substantially less. He waved a dismissive hand across the table at Lord Wingate. I need more troops, far more troops than can be gotten by impressment patrols and tempting convicts out of jailhouses. Millions at the very least. Perhaps an increased focus on voluntary recruitment? Lord Stolos speculated, rather indignant at having been interrupted. I've had analysts run the numbers, Lord Harlock said. Even if I tasked every last man in the Royal Army with recruiting, it will be years before we reach the necessary strength. I need a better means of bringing in recruits. Lord Stolos tapped a finger on the table. Propaganda, perhaps? If we impress upon the population the urgency of the Hadvari threat, they may perhaps be more willing to volunteer. I've conducted a few studies on the subject of propaganda, Lord Newton offered. I'm afraid public opinion takes some time to influence, but I believe within a few months of priming, I can guarantee an increase in volunteers. We're dancing around the issue, Lord Harlock said. As far as I'm concerned, there's only one viable solution. Lord Stolos narrowed his eyes. Which is? Mass conscription, Harlock said. We need to mobilize every last able-bodied man between the ages of 16 and 45 and put them all in uniform or set them to useful war work. Only then can we possibly field the numbers necessary to, as you say, grind the ginks under our boot heels. Lord Wingate tried not to frown at Harlock's use of the word gink. It was a corruption of the Hadvari word ginka, which meant roughly broken spear, itself a reference to the Hadvari practice of junking their weapons and equipment before surrendering. But it had taken on a particularly vicious connotation. Ginks were savages, little better than animals, incapable of any thought beyond low cunning and base treachery, and unworthy of trust or even basic human dignity. It was a dangerous sentiment to hold about an enemy. Underestimating your opponent like that had a way of inviting him to impress you, usually at your own peril. If Lord Stolos noticed the slur, he gave no reaction. While I share your conviction for the coming struggle, he said, I feel that the rest of the nation may take some time for the urgency of this task to sink in. Forcing the issue with mass conscription at this early stage might cause more problems than it would solve. For now, I think it were best to lead with a propaganda campaign. If in a few to his chair, Stolos turned to Wingate. In the meanwhile, what of the fleet? The fleet is patrolled and has deployed in a forward patrol stance along the Green River, Lord Wingate said. And multiple contingency plans are in place should Hadvar try to move against us at this early stage. But I have concerns about long-term readiness. Fuel prices have increased by nearly a 6 pence per barrel. 3 months of recruitment quotas have gone unfilled. And I am informed by Mr. Hanauer, our primary shipbuilder, that a welder's strike is presently delaying the completion of our latest airship. Lord Stolos nodded. Well, recruitment we've already addressed, and fuel prices we can presently do little about. However, this news of a strike is deeply concerning. Ordinarily, I am inclined to be receptive to the pleas of the working man, but as this is a war-critical industry, I believe a harder stance is called for. I agree, Hanauer spoke up very eagerly. And for a start, I would suggest that the act of striking be made a criminal offense. I second the motion, Walker added eagerly. No doubt the wealthy industrialist had encountered trouble of his own with strikers. Lord Stolos blinked. Is it not already a crime? It's not presently listed as such, Lord Newton spoke up. I've dealt with several incidents of this nature over the past few years. There are a number of ancillary charges that can be brought up. Disorderly conduct, breach of the peace, destruction of valuable property, things of that nature. But the act of striking is not in itself an actionable offense. Well, there we have our solution, Hanauer announced. We shall declare the act of striking to be a violation under Her Majesty's Code of Justice, punishable by... Lord Stolos cleared his throat in an unnecessarily loud fashion, and Hanauer quickly added, I mean, if that is your intent, of course, my Lord Protector. Such is indeed my intention, Mr. Hanauer. Lord Stolos regarded Hanauer coolly. But only in the case of those industries we judge to be crucial for the continued prosecution of the war. And of course, we must consider a punishment suitable to deter any such potential actions. Well now, surely a strike in a war-crucial industry is tantamount to sabotage, Lord Blackpool said. And Her Majesty's Code of Justice furnishes not but one penalty for such a treasonous act. I don't believe that's necessary, Lord Stolos said. The purpose of the law must be to deter, not merely to punish. And in any case, if we execute any worker who strikes, we may quickly find ourselves short of willing workers. Lord Wingate forced himself to listen as the meeting continued. Certain matters were dissected with meticulous care, such as when Lord Johannes Odysseus Seabrook delivered his analysis of the present status and disposition of Hundvari forces in Annalaria. The new Lord Seabrook had apparently just returned from Hundvari-occupied portion of Annalaria, where he had supposedly been traveling incognito, and his intelligence reports were interspersed with boastful anecdotes about cunning disguises, daring acts of sabotage, narrow escapes, all manner of intrigue. Somehow Lord Wingate couldn't quite bring himself to believe the man's fanciful tales. Stolos, however, seemed positively enraptured. Other topics received barely a moment's consideration, such as when Lord Newton requested a sharp increase to the size of his research grant and was awarded it without a word of protest. Well, Wingate appreciated his good friend's innovations as much as any other, but surely those were funds that could be better spent elsewhere, weren't they? What good did it know how to make lead float on magnets if it cost the fleet 3 new airships to learn it? The conversation dragged on, wandering from one subject to another in a terribly haphazard way, occasionally even doubling back to cover something they'd missed the first time around. Lord Stolas appeared to be making up the day's agenda as he went along. It was hardly unexpected, of course. The young lord was barely half a year into his lordship, and likely had little experience in the matters of management or governance. And yet, Lord Wingate reminded himself, he chose to take this responsibility upon itself. Kingdoms didn't run on pretty rhetoric alone. If they did, hack writers would control the world. And wouldn't that be awful? And I'll leave it there. We'll pick it up next week.
That's very interesting. I like the maneuvering and the nuts and bolts of how to actually run a kingdom. That's actually very interesting.
I like that too.
Yes.
I like the commentary.
Oh, yes. Yeah, the peanut gallery.
I
The
also
peanut
noticed
gallery is great.
I think I noticed the Wheel of Time reference there. Malden, the source of the greatest Wheel of Time plot cul-de-sac.
I actually, that was not. That was just the name of a town from, I knew a guy from.
Really? Huh.
There is a Wheel of Time reference in there, though, a deliberate Wheel of Time reference.
Oh, okay. Okay. Which one was that? I can't. I only noticed Malden.
It's subtle. It's a subtle one. It's when Harlock is talking about what they need more of, and he mentions they need more cookpots.
Oh, the ever-present cookpots in the White Tower. I'm assuming.
And the Trollocs.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Trolloc cookpots.
They do love their cookpots, those Trollocs.
Yep, they do. So, now that we actually now have our full cast assembled, please welcome.
我が力我が刃我が狂気我が狂気をもて見解せよエクスはあうがてエクスプロージョン
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, Tarek.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Alrighty. That works out perfect. Alrighty.
Yeah, it does.
Well, now that, alrighty, and I'm assuming, Akos, you want me to read yours?
Yeah, I don't read in front of others.
Alrighty. Alrighty. Let me pull it up. Hopefully my phone works okay with it, since sometimes it doesn't, and it's frustrating. Intro from Tarek. It sounds like she's like an amateur.
It's from the show Konosuba. It's that anime about all of the main characters are terrible people, and they're all you expect these adventurers to be selfless, heroic types. No, they're fits full of cowards, a masochist, an idiot, and a pervert, and it's wonderful.
That sounds
An
like
explosive enthusiast.
That sounds like Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie.
It's a great show. I highly recommend it. Very
I
funny.
second it.
Then I'm gonna have to go look at the first episode.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Alrighty. Okay. The Voyager left the ostentatious city without any resistance. Despite her hot-tempered nature, the Queen was no fool and was willing to listen to those who possessed wisdom and a silver tongue. Thus, the pale rider set her mighty eight-legged stallion toward the valley of the Eastern Kings. The miles flew beneath the hoofs and the pillars, grew thinner with every step, and eventually swallowed by the orange horizon. She was riding for hours by now. But the image of the valley was about to manifest in the distance. It was as if the very earth had disappeared, as if it was the edge of the realm from which one could leap off the world and touch the amber dais and climb into the skies. But when she reached the edge, it was not emptiness that awaited, but a desolate gorge, a scar cloven into the face of the earth. It was where the Eastern Kings buried the dead, where stone archways were the gaping maws of the underworld, and faceless statues of now dead warriors guarded their domain. Then she saw the dreadful, roaming work of morbid craftsmanship emerging from the distance. A flying monstrosity with a wingspan so big its shadow could engulf entire cities, its body long and sinuous like a serpent, its legs thin and bony, with claws the size of a horse, and great ruby eyes that glowed with an ancient malignancy. As the beast flew over her, it bellowed a terrifying battle roar that could ease even the bravest heart for a beat. Nazareth, I see the centuries of sleep have not tempered thy mood. Dost thou wish to relive the thrill of battle again? If so, I shall deliver, she said with an earnest smile. The beast roared again as if it approved of this challenge, then turned overhead and dived in a long arc, for sudden turns were not its forte. He came low, swooping down like an owl, his golden claws glowing with cascading energies. Those cloven grasps swept away man and beast with ease, broke entire battle formations with a single swoop, but her silvery beauty Sleipnir was as nimble as the hummingbird and quick as lightning. The eight-legged stallion leapt off the cliff, down the gorge, falling hundreds of meters, yet landing softly on the barren pathway, then propelled into a blindingly fast sprint. Not far behind was Azaketh, flying above the canyon, his wings too big to allow him lower. The Voyager looked up to see and could finally see Mothraji, the Clay King, eyes of burning silver, a darkened brown face molded into a stern expression, and body shaped to be larger than a man and harder than steel. In his left hand he held an iron javelin, long and heavy. With inhuman strength he threw it, and had she not steered her mount to the left, both horse and rider would have been impaled. Then came another with astonishing speed, faster than the first. But this time the Voyager two-handed her glaive and knocked the javelin to the side. Surprised by this, the Clay King grew more insolent and drove the flying beast dangerously close to the gorge, so close it could not move its wings without struggle. Sleipnir jumped from a Aaron Rock to broken archways and leapt high and crosswise. Nazareth extended his claws and growled, his obsidian beak cracked and broken and gaping with foul breath. Yet Sleipnir avoided him deftly, for he was the horse of dead gods, the stallion that could outrun death itself. From his back the Voyager swept high above the head of the Clay King, landing on the back of the flying demon. Despite his stature, Mathraji was as nimble, and with little effort he readied his own weapon. Glaive against javelin and might against skill was their battle, for his strength was tremendous, but her technique was more refined. While with experience, they were near equal. Now it was up to Nazkarith to tip the balance. He began to shake his half-mechanical body, flying erratically, lifting and diving, twisting and turning, like a demented bird. The Voyager lost her footing and had to hold herself with one hand, which made her long weapon unwieldy. And though the Clay King was in no better position, his strength and relentless assault became too dangerous. And so the pale shade leapt off at Nazkarith's wing and clove it in half. The creature cried out and fell toward the valley of the Eastern Kings, twisting and flailing helplessly. While falling free from the corner of her eye, the Voyager saw Slipnir rushing toward her. When she was close to impact, the stallion jumped high, and she mounted in midair before landing safely on the edge of the valley. Thus the mighty Nazkarith had fallen, his broken body laid in the valley, the wires in his wings snapped, his golden claws scattered, his neck twisted, his beak shattered, his red eyes dim and hollow. She sought for the undead king amongst the remains, but by then he was gone. Then the Voyager gazed into the spectral realm and saw his trace leading into one of the tombs. The entrance opened to a narrow hallway with a row of pillars at each side of the wall ahead. Where once was a mural, was now a gaping maw of darkness. She left her glaive outside and took a stairway that led into the dungeons, armed with an iron sword and glow crystal. There, in the dusty hallway, she stood by a stone coffin, often where long dead kings slept his everlasting dream uninterrupted by eons. Despite the lack of expression, Mothraji's indignant arrogance was apparent, and thus he spoke. What is it that you think you gain by fighting me? What are you, some fool who thinks she will live on as a legend? You shall not. I will crush you like I crushed your army. You may have killed my mount, but you cannot kill me. I am immortal, and my power is beyond yours. The Queen is somewhat distraught by His Majesty's behavior. I have come to soothe her feelings. The king laughed at her, yet failed to realize her sarcasm. You, how weak you must be, if she seduced you so easily. You would throw your life away for her. She is a sniveling snake whose poison has addled your mind. Can't you see the rotten kingdom she rules, the filth of civilization she has inherited, the corrupt society I helped to perpetrate? Are your reasons, then? If I'm a fool, then perhaps your wisdom can enlighten me. Why remain and resurrect poor old Nazkarith and wage war with your own daughter? Her words were full of honey to the king's ears, for he loved to demonstrate his intellect and hear his own voice. Why, that time when I was flesh and blood, I spent a great deal of time traveling. All my predecessors spent centuries to bring rival kings and realms to their heel. I was born to a line that had naught to do but to maintain a kingdom for a millennia by then. So I spent my time to expand my wisdom. While my daughter spent her time with petty games and politics, I was chewing through dusty tomes after dusty tomes, leading expeditions to faraway lands. One thing I learned was that the glories of the past will remain in the past. All that power, all that glory, is but a soothing shadow under which we search for comfort. Now our kingdom is but a cursed realm of hedonism and vanity, weak and delusional, a bed of petty power plays and greed. Why not tear it down, burn it to the ground, and build something mightier, something better? It was there when I began my search for immortality. So that you could build a world you could rule forever. Isn't that vanity in and of itself? After all, eternal life is the desire of many, including man, both lesser and equal and greater qualities than you. Lesser men do not deserve it, Greater men have never walked the earth before me. Why then? Why do you want to defend them? Because I value uniqueness. What? You heard me right. I value the unique. Whether it is a work of art, teachings of philosophy, a single artifact, or an entire kingdom, they are doomed. Sooner or later, their kingdom will collapse in on itself, or shall be brought down by greater forces. Perhaps, and when that comes, I shall be there and save what was meant to be saved. But I will not hasten the destruction of an entire civilization, wicked as it may be. You have disappointed me, my lord. I expected a king with greater wisdom and knowledge of the world of the dead. Now I see that you are but an overly ambitious fool, selfish, and lacking all principle. Overwhelmed with anger, Mithridates shattered the coffin and tore the bronze sword from the mummified fingers of the carcass, then viciously lunged at her. The Voyager dug in her heels and met at it with a blunt shock, her whole body shaken by the blow. "It is unwise to disrespect the dead," she sneered, then dashed aside to avoid his next blow. "They are my blood. They cannot harm me." She met the Clay King's heavy-handed approach with graceful footwork and sweeping deflections, but his body was impervious to her strikes, and in the confined space of the tomb, she had little space to maneuver. Thus, when the opening presented itself, she dashed to the staircase and fled for the entrance. "You may have been granted immortality, but it brought you no wisdom, Mithridates the fool. That is the name you should be remembered by. Come, embrace the fate you deserve, and accept nothingness." The Voyager mocked him as she fled out to the outside. The Clay King was about to answer her taunts, but was confounded for a moment. An invisible power stood against him at the entrance, trying to prevent his leave. However, the resistance was meager, and the spell weak. Thus, through the power of sheer will, he forced himself through the barrier. "You should have fled when you had the opportunity," he pointed at Slipnir. "I prefer to stand my ground, curse as it may be." The Voyager two-handed her weapon and thrust at the immortal king. In his arrogance, he did not bother to defend or evade, knowing full well that his enchantment would withstand any blow, even for magical weapons. But then he heard a cracking sound, and as he looked down, he could see splinters scattered at his feet. "It can't be. You may have heard, but did not listen. As I said, it is unwise to disrespect the dead. You have already drawn their displeasure by resurrecting Azaketh. Now you have desecrated one of their tombs. They cannot harm you, but they can weaken you and strengthen me." Now the Voyager had finally cut loose on the petulant fool. Her blade was a blur to the eye, and her cleaves came with the impact of a meteor strike. The king could do naught but defend and struggle backwards. His previously crude and outgoing way of fighting had gone, and could now only contend with the Voyager with a conservative defense. He struck her blade and pushed her back with all the strength he could muster, then sought to take back the initial with an assault of his own. The two launched at each other, but as the king swung it with the blade, he saw rotten on green shards of bronze flying in the air, and could feel his feet sink deep into the sand. He could hear the mocking voice of a long-dead king in his ears. Metal mauled into metal, bronze shattered into 100 pieces, and the Voyager turned her blade around and clove through the Clay King's legs. Now unarmed and helpless, the king held up a pleading hand and begging for survival, but the pale shade struck his fingers off. And with a crude smile, she plunged her fist into his chest and tore out the parasite. The creature had a long and twisting body like a snake, with strange appendages, thin as hair and rather numerous, their entangled shapes reminding her of the neurological systems of organic beings. The parasite could only live outside of its host for a small time, but even then the scientific knowledge which she could learn from it was deemed worthy of all the struggles. She raised her gauntleted left hand and cast a spell of curious nature. The symbols glowed brighter, then the very fabric of space began to rupture. A pocket dimension, impervious to time, where the carcass could not degrade. Her knees trembled, her double hearts ached, and her body became feverish. She was always struck with a card with fatigue after a demanding fight. Sleipnir was a tireless beauty, though, and took her away from this land safely and swiftly. She gazed upon the stars, a long look at eternal dance in the night, the never-ending symphony of creation and destruction, a fragment, a still image of the power of the cosmos. In that dark flow, this world, the kingdom, was but a pebble, and for that it was all the more precious. Despite the corruption, the lies, the vanity, they were not an ill-fated, cruel people. They had the chance to thrive longer, and thus the chance to create even greater magnificences in the future. And so when that time comes, when their civilization is inevitably grounded by the monstrosity of history, the legacy of a fine civilization would live on in her hands. This was the price she asked for. Prosperity. Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Interesting fight.
Wrong one.
I do
Yeah.
like some politics
Yeah.
and world building.
That was actually really cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting action. Slight editorial mistakes here and there, but definitely, I think it's a very interesting fight where it's a rock demon, giant bird demon, I'm assuming,
Yeah,
versus a person with a Sleipnir style horse.
Sleipnir is the horse from the Norse mythology.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I've heard of the rock of a rock, the bird kind of rock before. So
Well, everybody's heard of the Rock. Of course, we all hear what he's cooking.
sorry, I've been living under a rock. I don't know this rock you speak of.
It doesn't matter if you know who he's speaking of.
The rock I always think of is the mythical bird.
I know. Well, I always think of Dwayne the Rock Johnson because
No.
Yeah.
That's not who or what I think of when I think of rock.
Wait, you mean Dwayne? You're in for a shock, the Rock Johnson?
Oh yeah, the guy who played Maui.
Who made the wonderful meme, "What can I say except you're welcome?" Someone
Also, I did not know that we could read other people's work.
Yeah, I've done it a few times. Mostly
The parasite was creepy.
yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing comes from the idea of the Jewish golem, but with a bit of a twist on it, because there is this book series called The Necroscope from Lam Lee, and that gave me a bit of a inspiration about that one.
Becca.
Rock is a ginger homeboy.
No, the next one. Oh, what the hell?
Well,
That's not.
I can only say this. Where is it? Here it is.
And now, I think it's time we gave that filthy, slobbering mongrel of yours his shot! Attack! Rapid fire flurry!
We gotta put the dog down.
No, we just need to give him his shots.
Yeah.
Don't forget, this is a 4-kids dub, so the original skit probably did say, "Put the puppy down."
Yeah.
I think my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh clip is the one that's the giant mammoth that's voiced by Arnold Schwarzenegger or someone who's trying to sound like him.
Save me, Jesse! Well, It was not that bad.
Yes, it was.
There are worse movies.
There's worse propaganda. I have to agree.
All Christmas movies are terrible. All of them.
There are a few that are decent. Like
Charlie
Because they are
Brown.
technically not Christmas movies. That's why Die Hard is good. Because
Krampus
it's
Krampus is pretty good. I like that movie.
I think good things about Krampus too.
Christmas is a pagan carnival of sin, and anyone who celebrates it is going to hell.
Okay.
So says the Witchfinder General.
No, the problem is that it is not pagan enough. It's too washed out.
Look, Pan's gonna come to your house and he's gonna kick your ass, okay?
After
Get that
converting
goat
you to
foot shoved right up there.
pansexualism. After converting you to pansexualism.
Oh, shut up.
With his merry band of raccoons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I have not forgiven you for that movie yet either.
Dang,
I'm excited for the next one. I'm just wondering when that's gonna be. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know when that's gonna be. I'll have to figure it out. I know that like there's a lot of different bad movies that we can watch. We already watched. Don't look up and see the piano. Oh, okay. So, Wolf, I think that you need to fire your Acme deliverer, or they don't really stop.
Yeah.
Running for Amazon, didn't you?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, clearly the only reason why I am still alive is because the hitman Wolf hired sucks.
Oh no, we don't.
What do you want to do?
Yeah, well, wrong thing.
We don't hire them for you for the bad movies. We hire them for the directors and people who actually thought it was a good idea.
I still love it. The only two movies I've seen with done so far are The Rise of Skywalker and Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas. I'm 2 for 2 right now.
Can you even call a Rise of Skywalker a movie at all?
No,
Is it
I don't
not?
think we can.
Honestly, Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas is far worse. It's far worse.
I don't
than-
know. I honestly don't know, because here's the thing. In Rise of Skywalker, I was bored for that 2.5 hours. I cannot say I was bored during Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas.
That is true. It's kind of a unique. It's kind of a unique experience.
It really is.
Okay.
I think it is time for Wolf to take vacation to Sibir.
Clearly.
We have
Yeah.
a nice warm place in Siberia for someone like him.
Yeah.
Except
But
it is not warm and it is not nice.
Yeah. But I do feel obligated to do this.
The
one.
fact that the guy is alive proves that the hitman I hired sucked.
Yay! I was hoping you'd play that.
Not inaccurate.
So he keeps bringing it up of why he hates me. Yeah. I believe
Okay,
it is,
yeah, let's get
Let's
back.
keep going.
already.
Yeah.
I believe it is Mr. Spark the Light Bulb's turn, and then Turk, and then I will conclude.
So, question: how many of you are familiar with the Fallout universe?
I played a little bit of Fallout New Vegas, but I'm not very familiar with it.
I played New Vegas Tactics and the second one a little. So
I know enough about the series to the point where I've played Brotherhood of Steel. Not Tactics, Brotherhood of Steel.
oh, if there are memes, I'm going to get it probably.
So, I based it in that setting, and there are references to items and names and a couple things, but I didn't make knowledge of it dependent on it. So hopefully we'll get through this very well, and I'll try and differentiate my voice for each person, but I'm not going to be as good as Carl.
No, that's because
The
Carl
important thing is that you're trying.
Exactly.
The thing is, Carl
All right.
Sailor is Michael Kramer in disguise.
Yes, he is. And
I can neither confirm nor deny that statement.
I'm not too bad, but I also stumble a little bit, as you guys have obviously noticed. Hopefully I'm getting better, but
All right.
Well, Wolf will never say that. Well, Wolf would disagree, but that's because Wolf is invariably like getting his rocks off on your leg.
yeah.
All right. Let's begin. Detours of the Wasteland. Somebody's coming up alone and helpless. A stranded, rusted wreck in the sandy desert surrounding I-80. The Poseidon gas station was an opportune location to pick off travelers using the stretch of highway between New Reno and Vault City. Luis and his crew of 4 were only a small part of their band of Vipers, the main group in the ruined town of Lovelock, half a day's walk away. Stationed there for close to 2 weeks, he knew the place was a great choice. The station's giant sign had collapsed away from the building, the culprit a rusty red semi-truck that had collided with the base of the giant sign. Despite the fall in age, the sign structure was still intact and could be entered, allowing them cover, an ambush spot, and shade from the blistering sun. The gang had also slid over 2 rusty dumpsters to the other side of the road for an additional ambush point. Luis Chavez grinned as he sat up to join his companion and squinted at the approaching figure. "Is it a guy or a gal?" he asked. Billy, his scout and the only other non-meathead in his party, glanced at him in amusement before resuming watch of their approaching prey through his varmint rifle scope. "Almost certain it's a guy. Don't look that well geared. He's packing an old hunting rifle and geared up in some gas mask shit and a jacket. But I bet as soon as we spring on the fucker, he'll surrender," Billy assured. "Are you really sure it's a guy? Or is that only what you want? If I knew you were into men, too, I would have let you play with the last guy before we offed him." Billy smiled and simply replied, "You might want to signal the boys to get ready before you bungle it all yourself." Luis chuckled, slowly moving down the part of the sign they were concealed in, and peered across the road at the 3 other gang members behind the dumpsters, who were playing a distracting game of checkers, using bottles of all things as pieces. Infuriated, he sharply motioned at them. The underling facing him noticed, getting his fellows' attention. They all grabbed their guns and moved into position, knocking over the bottles in the process loud enough for Luis to hear from his position. "Damn idiots," Luis growled under his breath. "I'm going to smash those bottles over their heads after this." Billy checked to make sure their prey didn't react to the noise and gave his boss the thumbs up. The Viper leader nodded and then switched the safety of his 10mm submachine gun in his left hand off, then held his right hand up for the minions across the street. Billy stopped watching their prey briefly to check the leather scabbard on his belt, a rusty sword inside, and tightened the straps on his leg. As the person was about to pass the Vipers, Luis gave the signal. All the gunmen behind the dumpsters jumped out in front of the traveler. Jerking back, the figure dropped the hunting rifle and threw gloved hands into the air. Luis and Billy came out of their cover and joined to the left of their companions. Unlike the latter, who had pointed his rifle at the stranger like the other Vipers, Luis held his hand in a lazy grip, confident in the situation. "Kick the gun over here, or drop your ass," he yelled. The Wanderer kicked it to Billy, who swiftly grabbed the rifle and threw it off the road. Just a few feet apart now, the Viper leader scanned the sucker over, sharp eyes searching for valuable loot. The person was covered in a weathered brown military jacket and gray pants, several small satchels secured to the torso. The head was covered by a gray gas mask with a red-tinted visor, wrapped tightly on the top by the jacket's hood. However, it was clear despite the dense attire, the person was indeed a man. Damn it, Billy, thought Luis. His disappointment dissipated when he noticed a glow coming from underneath the man's left sleeve. He now pointed his submachine gun at the stranger and slowly approached him. Luis roughly grabbed the sleeve and pushed it up the arm, revealing a scratched but functional Pip-Boy wrist computer strapped to the arm. The little computers were worth a barrel of caps to the right people, since they were usually either broken or their owners were safe inside large settlements. Looky here, boys. We found a vault mole out of his burrow. No sudden moves, Vault Boy, or my guys will fill you full of holes. The traveler only silently stared at him, his expression hidden, but complied, slowly holding his Pip-Boy-equipped arm still as Luis inspected the device. The sizable dents and cracks around the case betrayed its age, though it seemed to work fine. Then another prize caught Luis's eye. Secured to the stranger's waist on his left side was a leather canteen, labeled in red marker, whiskey. The water sources near Lovelock weren't too irradiated, but the bitter liquid always gave Luis the feeling a little arm would grow out of his ass every time he drank from them. There was no alcohol or Nuka-Cola in Lovelock, since it all had been scavenged by the time their gang had settled there. Sunset Sarsaparilla appeared occasionally from their raiding and scavenging, but the drink was too sweet to him, and he was sick of the stuff. So that is why he mentally jumped for joy seeing the canteen. The head raider swiftly snatched it off the traveler's person, mockingly holding it up just out of reach while the men kept him in their gun sights. Thanks a Brent for the present, chump. Something like this is hard to find in this part of the great old wasteland. Tell you what, for your kind sacrifice to yours truly, we'll give you a painless death. How's that sound? Not giving the stranger a chance to answer, Luis unscrewed the plastic cap off and took a long chug from the canteen, then letting out a relieved sigh. Then he started to choke. With a now burning throat and a throbbing headache, Luis threw down the canteen and collapsed, rolling around violently while coughing hoarsely. Billy and the rest of the men watched motionless in horror, not focusing on their captive, who was no longer in their gun sights. He leapt at the Viper on the far right, a wiry man dressed in gray rags, a messy orange mohawk decorating his head. The traveler grabbed him by the throat, pulled him to his knees, and twisted the gunman's head at an abnormal angle. The two closest thugs turned back to where he had been just seconds ago, then to the sight of one of their own falling down dead. All this warning gave them was a chance to shout as he pounced on them while drawing a combat knife from inside his coat, slashing one Viper's throat, then stabbing the other in the windpipe. Billy rallied from the shock and tried to aim his varmint rifle at him, but his opponent was too fast. Having left his knife in the dead Viper, he lunged at Billy and ripped the gun out of his grip. Now holding the barrel with both hands, he swung the rifle butt at the Viper's head, catching him in the mouth. Staggering from the hit, Billy backed away and recovered. Spitting blood, his face contorted in rage as he pulled a sword out from its scabbard and attempted to slash through the deadly man. Still holding the rifle, the traveler used it to block one swing after another before sidekicking and tackling the Viper. On top, he pried Billy's sword out of its hand with overwhelming strength and ruthlessly stabbed it down on his heart. Getting up and standing over the corpses of 4 of the men who had held him up, the inconvenienced wanderer scanned the surrounding area for threats. Satisfied, he went to each of the raiders' bodies, ironically looting them for supplies. Finishing up, the traveler returns his attention to the last surviving highwayman, who had slowly dragged himself away from the fight and was leaning against the decaying dumpster. Luis could only continue coughing and shaking, the submachine gun in his left hand moving too much to do any good. The traveler came over and stopped a foot from the man, unfazed by the gun, and crouched down in front of him, smacking it out of Luis's hand. I could have killed you clowns before your riflemen saw me. This Pip-Boy you were lusting for showed your life signs, and I could tell you were in ambush positions. Not to mention you idiots moved dumpsters to the other side of the road, where they would have never been in the old world, the traveler said matter-of-factly, the cold voice distorted by the gas mask. Though my ammo's been low lately, and you lot were certainly not worth the last of it. Luis merely coughed violently in response. Wondering what's in the whiskey? I exposed it to an excessive amount of radiation, figuring someone like you would try to steal it from me. It may be a little cruel, though you never know what kind of situations it can get you out of, especially with raiders like you dumb enough to rob me. The Viper leader tried to laugh at that, but it came out more as a series of cracked grunts. However, he did manage a smile. Raiders? We're nothing close to those cockbags. Oh, so you're a tribe of junky highwaymen too cowardly to attack anyone who can fight back. That definitely sounds different. No, fuckwad. We're the last of the Vipers, hated by everyone and their mother. Even the NCR failed in killing us. NCR? Is that some other silly gang play acting in dresses? Wow, you must be new. Shit. The traveler slammed a quick punch in Luis's face. Yes, I am. Is this how all you locals treat your guests? No homemade pies, pointing guns in their faces while you rob them of life and supplies? He continued, now with a slight mocking tone. You could have at least given me a better challenge. The man stood back up, dusting the dirt off his pants. Though I do have to thank you for the pit stop. Like I said, I was running low on ammo, and now I got enough to take down the rest of your gang. The traveler pulled out a rag from one of those jacket's pockets and started cleaning his knife as Luis stared at him in a mixture of shock and fear. He turned his attention back to the Viper leader. Tell you what, buddy. I'll make your death quick since you helped me out with the supplies. No, wait, man. We weren't trying to kill you. It was just a joke. Luis's laugh came meek and faint. He desperately pressed on. The guns aren't even loaded. The Wanderer tilted his head and then looked over to the submachine gun near them and casually walked over to pick it up. Let's just see if you're telling the truth. He aimed the gun at Luis's head. The Viper's body shook as if he lay in a bed of snow instead of searing sand, his eyes betraying him, blinking rapidly in fear. Knew it, the traveler simply stated as he fired a single burst. The man looked down at the smoking gun and thought. He had better weapons, and this firearm had seen better days. However, it may have some useful parts he could use to repair his guns. Turning its safety on, he took out the magazine and stored it with the gun in his right torso pack. This traveler strided through his latest patch of death, heading over to the gas station. Finding a solid counter where the cashier centuries ago dealt with customers' money, he leapt up and sat on it, enjoying a break from the harsh sun and whack jobs trying to kill him. The weary wanderer yanked his backpack off and rummaged through the disorganized loot until he found his personal cooler unit. Silently cheering, he opened the container and pulled out with reverence an ice-cold Nuka-Cola. The traveler tried to conserve his valuable, delicious cola, but the fact that the unbearable sun had been drying him up on the inside his attire, and now just recently surviving an ambush without a scratch, called for a small celebration. After taking off his gas mask, he eagerly tore off the bottle cap, storing it in his cap bag, then took a swig. Remembering something, he carefully put down his drink and retrieved a small parchment paper from the recent loot he scavenged from the Vipers' bodies. Unfolding it, the contents showed a rough but readable map of the area, including the Vipers' camp, only 10 miles away. He could get there by nightfall and have the darkness to cover his approach. Looks like the Vipers have got themselves a nice establishment, the lone wanderer said to himself. Maybe I should swing by for some room and board. And scene.
Nice.
There's definitely a good selling of the post-apocalyptic world there. Really, very good stuff there.
Yeah, I wanted to give the impression.
Swears.
Sorry, what?
I very much approve of the fucking swears.
Oh yeah, I just had it so that the raider was the one doing all of it, since that's just what they do, and I just wanted to show that the character that we're following is a combat experienced individual.
Smart.
And it makes sense in the world,
By the year 2277, the word fuck is kind of like the word smurf. It means many different things.
Even now.
Smurf,
Yeah.
smurfing, stinking liberal smurf.
Go smurf yourself.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
What?
Nothing. I'm just remembering something. Me and my friend were trying to make a tabletop RPG, and we used the Smurfs as the basis. And what I mean by that was, I believe it was a Fallout RPG, and the Smurfs were these irradiated guys, and Gargamel was this fucking super mutant behemoth. So essentially, you have midgets versus a super mutant behemoth, and that's how you get the Smurfs in Fallout.
Okay, that's awesome. That is kind of awesome.
I think that's what it was.
Are they like goals?
No, I'm thinking it's just that they're just midgets. They're just midgets.
Just
They live in
moving-
this little shanty.
Depends on what you mean by I got smurfed. I got smurfed over by a few institutions, but I don't think I've been smurfed by anything. Unless somebody had their way with me in their sleep, but in my sleep, but I very much doubt I'm attractive enough to warrant that. Alrighty.
Alrighty.
Mr. Tarek, I believe it is your turn.
All right. So, well, today is chapter 3 of Shadows of Tyrion. The last time we left off, Aviana was chased through the wards by some vagrant, or by a vagrant, I should say. She came across a house and found a cloak and stole from a body. She stole a piece of jewelry from a corpse of a young girl. And now, when we left off, she was trying to find her way to the river. So that takes us to where we are today. All right, give me one moment. Okay. It had taken longer than she thought it would, but after walking for what felt like an eternity, Aviana heard the sound of the flowing river. After a few more minutes, she saw the Melkor River and the road running around it, and sighed in relief. She followed the road, observing more of the ruined buildings, none of which appeared to be suspicious, yet something was bothering her. It was a nagging feeling, as though somebody was watching her. It was similar to what she experienced when she first entered the wards. She cautiously continued down the road, keeping an eye on the surrounding buildings and roads, looking behind her when she heard what she could have sworn was snow crunching. Her suspicions fell to the wayside when she saw the bridge that led back to the trade district, and felt relief rush over her. A moment later, she heard the sound of someone running, and then felt something slam into the back of her. She tumbled over and felt her nose hit the snow and ice, and cried out in pain, noticing blood dripping onto the snow, turning it red. Then she felt a hand wrap around her mouth and nose as it continued to bleed onto the hand. The hand was dirty, covered in mud and dirt, and smelled of garbage and rotten food. A hot breath began to blow against her neck, visible in the cold air, as whoever it was began to whisper in her ear, "Keep your mouth shut and do exactly as I tell you." The voice belonged to a man who had a sinister chill to his words. Aviana's eyes went wide as she recognized the voice, and weakly squirmed as she tried to get out of his grasp. She could hear his stomach growling and feel the shakes and shivers of his body. What she felt next made her stop moving entirely. It was something sharp digging into her back. Her eyes darted all around her. She frantically began looking for something to at least give her advantage, but she found nothing but snow. She closed her eyes, whimpering, and felt her hood slide back over her head, and then her body forcibly turned around as a hand gripped her neck, squeezing. Aviana opened her eyes and confirmed her worst fear. It was the man who was chasing her earlier. "Wait a minute. I know you," the man said with a grin before shoving her face back into the snow by her neck. "I almost thought you got away, yet fate put you right back in my hands," the man said with a sickening laugh. "Where'd you get the cloak, you little tart?" The man asked as she felt whatever it was poking her back deeper into her. She could feel his hand go under the cloak and prod the pocket of it as he rummaged around, taking the purse, but then stopped when he felt something else. The man pulled the pendant from Aviana's pocket and the purse. Stealing from the dead, the man laughed, taunting. The man said, laughing, his words taunting Aviana as she made it a weak attempt to struggle and toss him off, or at least get his hand off her neck. Wait a minute. This is silver, ain't it? You've just ensured that I'm going to eat well for at least a month, the man said as she felt the object in her back starting to dig deeper into her clothing and prodding her flesh. Suddenly, Aviana heard a loud smack as the weight keeping her down fell off her and allowed her to get up. The man was on the floor groaning, his body shaking and trembling as blood was flowing from the back of his head, turning the snow he was laying on red. She turned around and saw a teenage boy holding a plank of wood that was stained with blood. The boy was almost as frail as her, but with a bit more muscle, blue eyes, and had a thin, gaunt face like hers, except he looked a bit older. He had dirty, long, blonde hair that ran down to his neck, which fluttered in the blowing wind. He wore a gray wool shirt, tan pants, brown boots, and thick white wool socks. The boy dropped the plank and looked at Aviana, pointed to the pendant and then the purse. Aviana nodded and quickly picked up the items, stuffing both of them into the cloak's pocket again, and began to run, following the boy. When the two of them arrived at the storehouse, Aviana slammed the door closed and barred it, after making sure no one was following them. The run had been murder for Aviana. Her entire body felt cold again, even with the cloak on, as the adrenaline left her body. Both of them slid against the wall and sat on the stone-cold floor. The sound of their panting echoed around the storehouse walls. Her body was finished. It didn't matter how scared she was. If she tried running again today, she was probably just going to fall over dead. She looked at the boy sitting next to her, shivering, panting just as hard as she was. She scooted over and draped part of her cloak over his body. What in the abyss were you thinking? The boy asked after several moments of silence, turning his head to look at her. Aviana looked into his deep blue eyes. I was thinking I might have enough money to get a warm meal today, Aviana replied as she shook the cloak, causing the coins and pendant to clang together. For the love of Tyrion, Aviana, going to the wards alone was foolish. You could have been killed, the boy said, his voice a little shaken. Aviana frowned and turned her head forward and brought her knees to her chest, hugging them tightly. I'm sorry, Merrick. I just wanted something to eat that wasn't moldy or stale. Merrick sighed, reclining his body against the wall again. So, what did you put yourself in what did you get for putting yourself in danger? Aviana reached into the cloak pocket and pulled out the coin purse as well as the pendant and placed them both in the Merrick's hand. Merrick bounced the purse a little before opening it, looking at the Dharma and closing it. How'd you get it? He asked before handing her back the Dharma. I did a job for Seraph. I had to deliver groceries and bring him back the payment, but the man wouldn't pay the full amount. Merrick nodded his head and then took a look at the pendant and the cloak around him. If you had a job, why'd you go grave robbing? Aviana held her knees tighter as Merrick put the pendant in front of her face, and she watched it dangle in front of her. The pendant twirled on the chain until the back was facing towards her, where it stopped and began twirling around again. The man you hit me earlier was chasing me earlier too. I hid in a small alleyway and I couldn't go back the way I came. I had taken shelter inside of a house for a few minutes. When I found it, Aviana replied quietly, her voice trembling to make a convincing lie. You shouldn't steal from the dead, Aviana, Merrick said, his lips stuck in a frown and his brows furrowed in disappointment. It wasn't like they can use it anyways, Aviana replied as she tried to shake the vision of the young girl's corpse from her mind. Merrick sighed and turned his face away from her, staring back at the warehouse. What are you going to do with it? I was thinking of selling it, maybe get enough Dharma for something to eat, Aviana replied sheepishly. Merrick sighed and shook his head, but as he did, his stomach began to growl loud enough that Aviana could hear. I promise if you come with me to sell it, I promise to share if you come with me after I give Seraph his money, Aviana replied with a sheepish smile. Merrick opened his mouth, probably to protest, when suddenly his stomach started to growl louder again. Fine. I still don't like it. Still don't like it, though. The bazaar had become crowded since Aviana had left. The once empty stalls were now teeming with merchants announcing their prices, as well as customers crowding around them. Pedestrians were moving from stall to stall, calling out orders and requests. The entire building was in a light with noise and warmth now, but at the same time, it was starting to smell between the people and the animals all packed into the building, even with the main doors open. Aviana held her nose and ran past the stalls to run to Seraph's, apologizing when she knocked into people, every bump making the coin purse bounce and shake. Merrick had suggested leaving the pendant at the storehouse in order to avoid it being taken by pickpockets, and also so as not to draw attention to themselves. The crowd pushed back against her, almost crushing her a few times before she finally made it back to Seraph's stall. She got there just in time to see Seraph arguing with a male patron in a red shirt.
100 Dharma? You've lost your mind, man! The patron cried out furiously. That's the price, sir. You can either leave or pay,
Seraph said, just as irritated. The patron scowled and smashed his boot into a crate before leaving. Seraph sighed and took a seat on one of the crates, lowering his head to look at the floor. Aviana had never seen Seraph like this before. Usually he was a very stoic man, stone-faced and proud, never showing weakness. Seraph put his hands to his face. His shoulders slumped and his body hunched over. Aviana quietly walked up to him. Seraph, I'm back, Aviana said quietly as she looked at him. After a few moments, he raised his head looking up at her, frowning.
Took you long enough. Did you make the delivery?
Aviana nodded and took the purse out of her pocket and handed it to Seraph. Her lips began to quiver. She wanted to tell him what happened, but the words just wouldn't come out. Seraph took the purse, emptying the gold coins on the counter, and began to count it.
13, 14, 15. Where's the rest, Aviana?
Seraph asked. His eyes were like daggers, and his face began to turn red. He wouldn't pay the full price. He said you were charging too much, Aviana explained. Seraph's eyes were drawn to Aviana's cloak, as she could hear his heavy breath leaving his nostrils, sounding similar to a bull about to charge.
Then where did you get this?
He asked, taking the wool cloak between his fingers and rubbing the material. Aviana's blood went cold as he began to feel the cloak. I found it. Seraph, I swear I did not steal from you, Aviana cried out, feeling her eyes beginning to well up in tears.
Liar!
Seraph screamed, causing everyone in the area to stop and stare at the two of them.
I knew you couldn't be trusted.
I swear to Tyr and Seraph, I didn't steal from you. I swear on my name I didn't, Aviana said, whimpering, her body shaking and trembling as she closed her eyes tight.
You don't have a name to swear on, and your words mean nothing. I knew trusting you was a mistake, and now I'm going to make sure no one else makes the same,
Seraph announced as the audience continued to grow around them. Aviana felt his large hand grab her wrist and pull her with the strength of an ox, almost dislocating her arm in the process. She struggled and strained, her body trying to pull away when she felt herself being lifted up into the air by her arm.
Let it be known that Aviana, a Civet, has stolen from me. In accordance with our laws, she must be punished,
Seraph announced, holding her high enough for everyone to see. Aviana watched in horror as he picked up a large knife from the counter and readied to swing it at her hand. Aviana's face was red, tears dripping down her face and onto the dirt floor as she hung in the air, staring into Seraph's eyes and shouting, I didn't steal from you, Seraph. I swear to Tyrion, I didn't. Stop! Merrick's voice called out from the crowd as he made his way through it, pushing and shoving his way through. Merrick broke through the crowd and began to yell as loud as he could. She didn't steal from you, Merrick announced, his voice exhuming authority and grace as he spoke.
How can you be so certain she didn't?
Seraph asked, the knife still in his hand, ready to swing at a moment's notice. I was in the wards when Aviana delivered the order. I can promise you, she didn't steal any money from you. Merrick turned around and pointed at Seraph. Merrick turned around and pointed at Seraph, scowling as he said his next bit with bile in his voice. You say that Aviana is a thief and a liar, yet I almost watched her get killed protecting your payment. The crowd began to murmur to themselves as Merrick gave his account, his voice firm, his back straight and his chest high. Despite his frail body, he frail body, his poise and grace was as strong, and gave him an air of authority.
How do we know you're not her partner in this? Seraph retorted, shaking Aviana's arm, making her flail in the air and causing her to cry out in pain. What would I have to gain from lying for her? I'm doing this because I can't stand watching someone be punished for something they didn't do.
The crowd's murmuring grew louder as seeds of doubt began to sow amongst the crowd. Many of the onlookers began to turn their attention to Seraph as they started to question if he was sure about whether or not what he was saying was truthful.
Are you willing to swear on your family name? That what you say is true?
Seraph called out. The crowd gasped before going silent. All eyes fell upon Merrick. Aviana could see Seraph's eyes darting around the room as though he was looking for something. Everyone else in the crowd had turned their eyes from Seraph, and they were now looking at Merrick. Merrick turned to look at her, and she could see the conflicted look in his face. She felt an involuntary whimper leave her throat, and she shook her head. He shouldn't have to risk dishonoring his family name when it was the only thing he had left, especially not for her. Merrick took a deep breath and spoke to the audience. I swear by the honor of House Justin that my words are true. Do you swear under the House Laris that yours are? The air grew cold as everything went still, and all eyes fell upon Seraph as they waited for a response. Seraph's face turned redder as he became more visibly frustrated, his eyes still darting around the room before they stopped at a figure. Aviana turned her head to see what he was looking at. In the crowd, she saw Dero with his arms crossed. After a moment, he sighed, let go of Aviana, dropping her onto the floor with a thud.
Very well, boy. I'll accept your word.
Seraph squatted down and whispered in her ear.
If you ever come near my stall again, I won't let anyone stop me from taking your hand.
Seraph let go of her and walked back to behind the counter of his stall, and the crowd began to disperse. Aviana could hear several citizens talking out loud as they began to walk away. Poor boy, getting fooled into risking his name like that. Svets are such devious snakes, one older woman said.
Thank Tyrion the Black Scholars weren't here today. Otherwise, that boy would have been in a lot of trouble,
a man said out loud to another. Aviana looked up and saw Merrick extending his hand. She took it and he helped her lift her up. Aviana dusted off her cloak as the two of them walked away from Seraph's stand, who was still staring at them, his face red with the knife now embedded deep into the stall's counter. They exited the bazaar and walked into the street, which was still busy despite the snow falling hard, and a fierce gale rushing down the street. Merrick held her hand tight as she led her to an empty alleyway between two buildings, her body still shaken and her mind numb. Are you all right? Merrick asked, his voice dripping with concern as he checked her arms for injuries. The arm Seraph grabbed was starting to bruise at the wrist, as the wrist was already turning black and blue. It's going to leave a decent bruise, but it doesn't look too bad. Why'd you do it? Aviana asked meekly. Why did I do what? Merrick asked, letting go of her arm and looking into her eyes. Why did you lie? You risked the only thing you have left of your family. Why do it for me? Aviana asked, words trembling out of her mouth. I wasn't lying. Nothing I said was untrue. I was in the wards this morning, and you told me yourself that the man wouldn't pay you the full amount. Also, I would have known if you were lying. You always giggle when you do. And I did it because, well, you're the only friend I have left, and I didn't want something to happen to you. Aviana stood silently as Merrick finished. Every word filled her with a warmth that no blanket or sheet could ever provide. Wordlessly, she wrapped her arms around him and hugged him tightly, her face buried in his chest. He slowly patted her back before pushing her gently and looking down at her. Why don't we go sell that pendant and get something warm to eat? The two of them walked back to the storehouse, avoiding the foot traffic coming their way. Merrick held her hand tightly the entire way. Ever since she had met Merrick at the orphanage, he had always been there to protect her, keeping her safe from danger and looking out for her. However, back when they did live at the orphanage, it wasn't just her he protected. He did his best to defend all the other children as well. She remembered one incident where a group of them had gone to a farm outside the city to help with the summer harvest. One of the children was resting on the ground when the taskmaster appeared. The taskmaster was a cruel man, constantly yelling at them, smacking them over the smallest misstep. The taskmaster began yelling and kicking one of the younger orphan boys named Darren, causing him to cry out in pain, and he was too exhausted to get up. Merrick ran and stood between Darren and the taskmaster, holding his hands out wide, his face like a stone, without any fear. The taskmaster screamed at Merrick to get out of the way. Merrick refused and stood firm between the two of them. Taskmaster began to kick and punch Merrick instead, beating him until another laborman finally pulled him off. Merrick's body was now beaten, bruised, and bloody, with one eye blackened. Despite the beating, he still turned his head to ask Darren if he was all right. When Darren told him that he was, Merrick managed to put up a relieved smile despite his injuries. She and the others ended up carrying Merrick home back to the orphanage to be cared for. His injuries had left him bedridden for a few days until they could get enough money for an alchemist to treat him. Throughout his recovery, that prideful smile never left his lips. And that's the end of chapter 3.
Very interesting.
Good.
Aw.
Yeah.
I like Merrick.
Yeah, I do. A lot.
Yeah, very good combination of save the cat and kick the dog in this.
Yeah. I like how Aviana and Merrick bounce off each other too.
Thanks. Merrick is probably the second most important character, though. Like, people keep asking me why is she still alive? Why hasn't she lost the will to live? He's the reason. He's her entire support structure.
Ugh.
It's
Ouch.
it's sad because it's kind of like, well, when they did live in this orphanage, they had more people, but now they're all each other have left.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. So first, I actually did a poll for the last thing. And so I actually very much need to promote one of my other books. And that would be The Rise of the Dark Queen, though admittedly, like, I'm going to have to do some editing on it soon. But this is essentially, so this is the book. I need to like re-upload, since I've done some like tinkering and stuff with it a little bit ago. But this is kind of the synopsis. So a mysterious lady in black armor rides into a frozen, barren wasteland, seeking for revenge against those who usurped her throne centuries ago. Within a few days, she brings the trolls, goblins, and humans living in the frozen waste under her control, and marches south to take her revenge. Their first attack into the usurped kingdoms yields a surprising find: a young boy named Soren, an untrained sorcerer who the Dark Queen takes under her wing. In a well-thought-out battle, Soren kills the king and receives the title of Kingsbane. The queen sees a formidable lieutenant in this boy and elevates him accordingly. From there, they wage a long war against the usurpers, aided by trolls, human warriors, and goblin thralls. The hammer is forged to eat last, ready to smite the usurpers and lay their kingdom low. So that's kind of the rough synopsis, and I'll start with kind of the Dark Queen's first scenes in this. Let me see. Ah, there it is. Let me see. It's just loading right now. Oh. My phone is being stupid. Yeah, I will, yes, oh, that's cute. Yeah, I'll try to convince it to actually pick it off the shelf. I'll try to convince you to pull it off the shelf. That's the hope. Prologue. Foundations of the Dark Kingdom. The Dark Queen, she could remember her name, but it was not to be known by anyone, opened her eyes slowly. How long had she been asleep? Where was she? It seemed as though there was nothing but darkness around her. Raising her hand to examine her surroundings, she sighed in relief as she felt the sapphire ring on her finger clink against a rock lid only inches away from her face. She drew on the immense power held it within the artifact in her ring finger, then hurled it into the ceiling, blasting it apart in a shard of ice. She rose from the coffin and conjured a ball of black ooh fire above her palm. Stone walls surrounded her, plain rock forming the confines of the tomb. As the queen looked around, she saw the arms she had worn into battle centuries ago resting on a stand near her coffin. Casually, she walked out of the stone room into the exterior of the cave, the dark tomb designed that no sunlight could ever enter. No ornamentation was anywhere to be seen when the Anarians, the Oath Breakers, had locked her away. They had put the minimal amount of effort in. Karsh, she whispered into the darkness, where are you? The spirit of her dead son appeared close to her, black cloak drifting in a non-existent breeze, his red veil concealing his face except for his forehead and dead white eyes. The fact that he was simply torso, head, and arms without a trace of legs gave him an ethereal look as he drifted toward her. My lady. So he doesn't remember me, she thought sadly. The memory must have decayed over all this time. How long has it been? She asked. 1,000 years, my lady, the white said in his whispery voice. The world has changed. Many things are different. Well then, she whispered, putting her hand on her arm and sending it to the nether realm. Show me what this world has come to. As you wish, Karsh said quietly. My baby boy, the Dark Queen thought as she strode through the tomb toward the exit. Those who murdered you might have perished either by old age or the sword, but the descendants of the Oath Breakers and murderers who killed my family will pay for what they've done. As she approached the doors, frost covered it. However, she did not shatter them. She merely pushed them open. Raising her hand to shield her eyes, the Dark Queen strode out into the moonlight. She could feel the heat of summer around her, making the world seem humid and uncomfortable. Casually, she pulled Kieran from the Wraith world, the black red-eyed horse appearing in a flash of blue flame. She pulled herself into his saddle and rode away from the sight of her tomb. The shadow of night cloaked the Dark Queen as she made her way through the streets of Furnust. The ancient city was pristine, well kept, bustling even after the sun went down. Men drank to the king and his sons, which made her grimace, but there was nothing she could do at the moment. Despite their powers, there were limits. She could not control minds or even read thoughts. If she wanted to take her kingdom back from these usurpers, she would need an army. And from the looks of it, there were great numbers of men here at Furnust. Casually, she entered the Wraith world, instantly shifting her view to a more ephemeral plane of existence. The Wraith world was identical to what she would have seen in the actual world, but was in constant flux, as if pieces of the wind were blowing and reforming in an unending storm wind. Casually, she walked through the gates of the intersection, past the ancient monuments that graced the courtyard in front of the citadel, each to commemorate a significant event. The smaller she smiled at the sight of, the other filled her with anger. One was to commemorate the death of her husband, the other to celebrate the ascension of Isidar, the man who had murdered her and her 2 children. Face fixed in an expressionless mask, she walked into the throne room, invisible to the guards defending the throne that had once been hers. Slowly she examined the ethereal busts of the kings that had taken the throne since her death. Nothing before Isidar was remembered here. Breathing slowly, the Dark Queen restrained herself from reaching her hand out and crushing the statues. That would come soon. Perhaps she could return to her kingdom and they would welcome her, though that was a faint hope. Those damn peasants are supposed to be paying 3 times what the coffins are receiving. The Dark Queen turned to see a man in fine armor striding through the throne room, accompanied by a group of what looked to be scribes. Why do they resist my rule? The crown has not held any real sway over Radar and Entry's majesty, one of the scribes remarked, nor truly of Cardolan, until recently. I am the king of Anaria, the king snarled. All of it, even that fly-speck excuse for a province. Supposedly the hillmen have begun to form a rebellion, sire. One of the scribes put in, robes swishing as he tried to keep up with the king. They are led by a hill chief named Hualtar. Soon they will assault our garrisons in Raldar. Then I will crush them like the insignificant ants they are, the king growled. Send word to my generals. We are marching to show exactly who is king here. Casually, the Dark Queen strode away, knowing what she needed to do. This land was in need of her, and it was only a matter of time before the land was in ruin. Only she could keep Ipanaria from destroying itself. Scarf wrapped around his face, Soren hefted his small pack as he strode along the empty Radar road, ignoring the cold wind that chittered across the hilly landscape of the weakest of the 3 Anarian kingdomships. As he neared a small village, the albino teenager raised his ragged scarf to cover his unnaturally pale skin. Uneasily, he let his red eyes survey the town as he walked through the dirt streets, noticing in each little movement of rat, pigeon, and other vermin moving through the streets. Various bits of human refuse were there. Whores, cheap butchers, and beggars were throughout the small huts. The crowd parted around him, most of them ignoring him as he passed. At least it wasn't what he would have got in Aethadar or Cardolan. What choice of death would have been his options, and then only based on which kingdom he was caught. Being boiled alive in holy water, being burned alive, getting beheaded, getting stabbed, and skinned were only a few of the various ways of purifying his soul of his curse before he was sent into the afterlife. It was all false. Soren was as regular a man as could be found, apart from his ability to kill people with his knife, that is. Absently, he fingered the hilt of the long black dagger on the sheath in his belt. Whenever he killed someone with the weapon, it was as if a piece of their soul entered his body. It was a strange sensation, one he hadn't had to use in quite some time, but not since that small Aethadar patrol had seen his face close to one of the skinning alive places. Thankfully, he'd managed to get 3 with his sling just before the other 2 got to him. The first had attacked him with a sword, but Soren had managed to stab the man through his armor before he'd stolen the sword and killed the final soldier. Soren was always stronger and faster than his enemies, especially after he'd used the dagger on someone. How do I do it? He wondered, hand closing on the knife hilt. Master Soren? Soren turned to see a woman with a haggard face and 2 children hunting against her skirts. I've heard you bring food to poor village folk. A few other people began filtering toward him, eyes hungry as they stared at him. Slowly, Soren unslung his pack and began handing out bread, fruit, and sausages to the hungry people. The children eat first, he said firmly as he passed some apples to the small boys. Once they were all fed, Soren began distributing food to the adults. Get in there quickly, he advised, indicating the huts around him. You don't want the patrols to catch you with that food. Thank you. The woman who'd approached him first said quietly, stroking her little boy's head. Thank you so much. Soren turned away, then tossed the woman a bag of clinking coins. Keep them all fed. Can I see your face? She asked. I want to know who saved my children. Soren ran and his tongue along his canines thoughtfully, then pulled down his scarf, revealing his milk-white face and bright red eyes. They backed away, the children looking shocked while the mother simply looked at him. Yes, I look like a ghoul. Soren pulled his scarf back up and turned away. A ghoul wouldn't have helped my children, the woman remarked. We won't forget you. Overcome with emotion, Soren swallowed, then began striding away, mud spattering his boots as he walked through the village. He couldn't stay long. There were other villages he needed to visit. Soren pulled his cloak closer around himself as he watched the moon rise over the hills of Radar. Hopefully he could find someone to serve, someone he could believe in. This small kingdom was dying, even if the people in it didn't realize it. They needed a savior, someone to bring the kingdom back to a time of peace and prosperity. The Dark Queen contemplated over the ruined hut, blue fire in the hearth chilling the room to the appropriate temperature. Ice coated the walls like paint, wood encased in the frozen mass. Her black hair was coiled in a bun behind her neck, while a simple shirt and trousers exposed her pale skin to the dim light of the flickering blue fire. The Dark Queen stood and walked to the sack where she had placed on the floor. Inside the sack was her armor, including her iron crown helmet. The hut where she had appropriated for her preparation was a pitiable affair. Holes in the roof large enough to toss a wolf through cast the dim, cold light of day into the otherwise dark room. The Dark Queen picked up her armor and slowly began putting on the links of overlapping plate, leaving her helm for last. The helmet was glittering steel, a helmet of spikes ringing the temples of the helm, the gaping emptiness where her face had been exposed by the wide mouth. Now she was properly cloaked and hooded. She picked up the helm and placed it atop the cloth covering the empty hood where her face should have been. The dark cloak flapped idly in the cold air. Her armor made no sound as she exited the hut. The corpses of the Dunedain refugees, who had been the ramshackle building's original owners, lay strewn about the snow-covered rocks of Angmarn. They had been slain by Anarian enforcers whose task was to simply keep the people out of their lands. Several dead small children lay next to their parents, blood matting their thick furs. Righteous anger boiled inside the Dark Queen at the sight of the children. Surely they could have let the children alone. Beside the corpses floated her faithful white, Karsh, his wide eyes sweeping over the valley, corpse white face, expressionless above the red veil over his face. Even when the frenzy of battle came upon the white, his pale eyes held no emotion. His black cloak hung in the air, the breeze stirring the cloth as he floated above the snow-covered ground. To many, the white's appearance was disconcerting, his cloak covering the majority of his skeletal form. Even his body was not concealed by the cloak. Oak was unnerving, pale, corpse-white hands clutching two swords, their blades shimmering darkly in the pale northern sunlight. The rest of him was withered and bone-white, seeming barely held together by the skin. The Dark Queen had had a name once, but that time was long gone. She could feel her ring artifact under her gauntlet, metal digging into her essence. Her physical form was slightly ethereal, the product of being a revenant, the greatest of the 4 lieutenants of the now fallen Calabria. Kirin, her dark horse, stood still, though his dark eyes darted around. The armor around his back clanked as the Dark Queen pulled herself into the saddle, silent companion beside her. The Dark Queen rode quickly toward the bleak mountains, while Karsh floated beside her toward a canyon leading toward the dark snow-covered peaks. Finally, Karsh spoke. "So, what shall we do, my lady?" he asked, voice hoarse and soft as if deprived of breath. The Dark Queen considered the question. "The North Kingdom must not know that we have come to bring ruin upon them," she answered calmly, deep voice resonating over the desolate icy wastes of Angmarn, despite her tough tone. "Sardar will come to their aid if they know they are attacked by the Dark Queen. I will have complete dominion over the West and the utter eradication of the heirs of Anaria. The line of usurpers will be broken. Too long have they poisoned my kingdom. Strong words, dread lady, Karsh remarked calmly. But how shall this feat be accomplished? We have no army here, no base to operate from. If we attempt to destroy Anaria ourselves, we will not succeed. Perhaps if we had Amalia's army. Do not speak of that. She would not hear of asking for help from that woman. Besides, Amalia was indifferent to the North Kingdom. Not so with the Dark Queen. Seeing what had happened to her kingdom had been a torment into her. Splintered into 4 kingdoms, one of them just a penal colony where criminals and other dissenters had been thrown for the better part of several hundred years. By now, even the memory of her reign in ancient Anaria had been centuries ago, and now vanished. Casually, she pointed toward the mountains. Here among these dark peaks we shall build a stronghold to bring ruin upon the North Kingdom. She rested her hand to sword hilt. There is great anger and discontent in this place, especially in the dark Dunedain. They had been oppressed by the Anarians for centuries. Karsh was about to speak, but the Dark Queen silenced her servant with a curt gesture. She heard sounds of battle and the roars of what had to be a troll of tremendous size coming from further into the canyon. The panicked shouts of men told her who was getting the worst of the exchange. Come, she said imperiously, drawing her sword. Let us see what fortune has put in our path. Karsh slowly and silently drew his sword. They will hear whispers no more, he said quietly, swords scraping against each other as he crossed them. No man can stand before our blades. The Dark Queen completed the exchange. She spurred her horse forward, dark hooves was churning up the snow. What the Dark Queen was expecting and the reality of the situation was completely different. She had expected a group of men fighting some troll with a club and crude armor. What she actually saw was a large troll wearing plate armor, a massive single-edged sword fending off a score of Anarians, some armed with both swords and spears, others with bows and arrows. The bowmen had swords at their sides, but they left engaging the monstrous troll at close range to their companions. Based on the bodies lying on the ground, the Dark Queen could see that the fight had not gone well for the troll's assailants. The ones likely enough to die from the troll's fist lay dead against the walls, while those unlucky had been sliced in half by the massive single-edged blade. The Queen had never seen a warrior troll who fought like a trained swordsman. Swiftly, the Dark Queen made up her mind. The troll was very likely to come out the victor, but the Anarians might by accident kill this singular creature. Even as she watched, several arrows pierced the creature's arms, and a few sword strokes caught the creature's legs, causing him to drop to his knees. Such a beast would be a useful servant indeed. The Dark Queen drew her long pale sword and charged forward, heels digging into her black horse's flanks, snow flying under his hooves. As she charged, the Dark Queen let out a shriek of defiance and challenge, the sounds of battle stopping for a brief moment as the terrifying scream seemed to cut the air like a knife. Several of the men fell to the ground, clutching their ears, or turned their attention to her, expressions horrified. 3 of the archers knocked arrows and fired a volley at her, but their arrows bounced off her armor like they were sticks. She reached out a hand, drawing on the power of her talisman, a small ring concealed under her armor. Green mist swirled around the warriors, causing them to wobble and shake. The troll's injuries immediately closed, sword strokes vanishing, arrows turning to vapor. The troll took a moment to look stunned, then took advantage of his sudden healing and weakened opponents. Like a farmer with a monstrous scythe, he cut down several of the remaining Anarian warriors, even as the Dark Queen slammed into them and slew the others with a few swift blows. Karsh wafted over them, horse breasts whispering silently as he drifted over the fallen enemies. He raised his swords and began to speak words in an ancient, dark language. Purple vapor rose from around the dead men, and in an instant a small group of wights appeared, hooded skeletal figures appearing from the vapor. These new wights would not be useful for battle, considering that even a single sword stroke through their bodies would dissipate them unless she pushed them into corporeal matter to give them some bit of defense. Apologies, I lost my place. The troll warrior gazed at the Dark Queen silently, then grunted and turned away. The Dark Queen spoke quickly. "Troll of the North, what brings you to this place?" The troll growled and ran a green meaty hand along his sword blade. "Bwah! Come to kill iron-skinned men who live in mountains to north. Too long have they kept trolls fighting trolls." He gestured toward a raised valley only a few miles along the mountain pass with his large three-fingered hand. "Rogash, bring trolls together. Take gold and meat from men in green lands." The Dark Queen smiled inwardly. "Your destiny is at my side, Rogash, not scrabbling for scraps." She indicated where he had pointed. "Bring your brethren to my banner, and there will be gold for you to grasp, meat to devour, and blood to stain your blades without end." Rogash looked down at her, then bared his teeth. They were large white bricks of ivory, stained with red blotches. "Dark Queen, mighty fighter, speaks well." The Dark Queen sheathed her sword and extended a gauntleted hand. The troll took her hand in his large three-fingered one. The troll's hand was so large that it enveloped her hand and then some. The troll suddenly released her hand and began jogging toward the summit. The Dark Queen motioned to Carson her new wights, then dug her heels into her horse's flanks. Her stallion took off at a gallop, hooves churning up snow and ice under his heavy stride. The wights ghosted behind her, horse breath sounding like the ever-encroaching onslaught of death. The clash of battle began to rise above the howling of the wind, the unmistakable sounds of trolls fighting trolls. Rogash roared and leaped up the rocks like a mountain cat, sword and a huge sleek on his back clanking against his armor. The Dark Queen followed swiftly with her horse, the long path of the rising slope leading her directly to the site of battle. Before her was a state of chaos, hulking green trolls in leather armor wielding steel hammers against smaller ape trolls with large bladed pickaxes, shields made of wood strapped up to their forearms. Rogash bellowed and drew his sword. The deep-throated roar cut through the ruckus of combat, even as the gargantuan monster leaped into the midst of his brethren, impact knocking them aside like chaff in the whirlwind. Unwilling to leave this to simple brute force, the Dark Queen sent out tendrils of fear into the other trolls, causing many of them to drop their weapons and cower before her. "Fight stop now!" he roared, brandishing his sword. The smaller trolls backed away from their larger cousin, weapons held apprehensively. Rogash bared his teeth and motioned to the Dark Queen. "New master speaks." The Dark Queen nudged her horse forward and gestured to the trolls. "For centuries men have goaded you to battle against yourselves, but if it is the blood of men you thirst for, then it is the blood of men you shall have." The trolls began to cheer, guttural voices ringing out as the green trolls raised their hammers above their misshapen heads, while their shorter, stockier brethren slammed their pickaxes against their shields. Karsh floated up behind her and whispered, "They revel as if they had won the victory already." "Indeed," the Dark Queen nodded her helmeted head. "They are brutes, yes, but they will serve their purpose in bringing to pass my objectives. The banner of the Iron Crown will fly over this land once again." She motioned to the wight peremptorily. "Go, search out our enemy. Let's show them a display of our might." Karsh breathed out slowly and flew away, hard-packed in blood-stained snow, unruffled by his passage. The Dark Queen motioned to Rogash. Send 2 of the fastest trolls to gather more forces. I need an impressive army to send the Anarians running. Rogash rubbed his chin. To north is Iron Skin Camp, he remarked, pointing with his huge sword. When trolls see smoke from ruins, they come. The Dark Queen turned her horse toward the mountains. Then that is where we shall go. As if on cue, Karsh appeared out of the sudden cloud of black vapor. There is an outpost of warriors with bows, spears, and swords, all forged from dark iron not far from us. The Dark Queen smiled. Now we shall see how courageous they are. Hark pulled his cloak tighter around himself, more to keep himself hidden in the snow than for warmth. He had long since acclimatized himself to the chill of winter here in this forsaken place. His sword hung at his side, his bow next to him, strong and ready. From his perch atop the crags he could clearly see the valley below, where the small garrison guarding the trolls were gathered for battle. He had heard some sounds of combat, but nothing had really stood out until a few moments ago, when suddenly a bestial roar had been heard clearly throughout the valley, then dead silence. There had been a report of some monster troll that had been roving around, but they had already sent out a search party to deal with the brute. Either way, a single control could do no lasting damage. The chill wind bit into his face despite the cloth wrapped around his face. Gritting his teeth, Hark ignored the intensified cold and simply focused on watching the past. In an instant, a host of figures appeared out of a purple cloud of vapor, then shot toward the camp. Hark cursed, grabbed his bow, knocked an arrow, and fired in one swift motion. The other rangers sitting on their crags began to barrage the figures, dispersing them into blue vapor. The horn call signaling the imminent attack sounded, causing the warriors below to pour out of their forts and palisades to line up in a battle formation. Hark drew back his bow and fired again. This time his arrow struck one of the ethereal creatures in the chest. Its sudden shriek of pain caused him to flinch. It was like the howl of a condemned soul. In an instant it dissolved into purple mist and disappeared, even as the other creatures struck the packed ranks of men. Initially they tore through them, killing several men before the Anarians finally began to fight back more desperately, several dozen surrounding one of the whites, easily destroying one of the creatures. Then, as if this had been planned, an army of trolls began thundering down the pass. White trolls in front, furry pelts ruffled by the speed of their attack as they charged toward him. Their larger, slower cousins, the hill trolls, charged behind them, their hammers, leather vest, armor pushing aside the small barricades in their path as if they were nothing. Then at their head emerged a tall figure in a spiked iron crown and metal armor. As the figure approached, Harik felt a terror he had never experienced in his life claw at him. He had control of it, but it was something beyond what he had faced in his lifetime. You will hear whispers, no more. The voice next to him was not human. In an instant, Harik fell into oblivion. The Dark Queen reveled in the flurry of true combat. It had been too long since she had fought in a pitched battle, and oh, she had missed that exhilaration. It was satisfying to see her enemies fall before her blade. Her troll warriors crashed through the enemy as if they were nothing, the picks and hammers of the trolls sending men flying or smashing them into pulp with their fists or weapons. The Dark Queen's blade took the final man's life, however, a tall man with a steel helmet covering all but his face. She carefully cleaned her sword on the fallen man's cloak, then motioned to Rogash. We must continue on and spread out into the mountain passes. We must gather all of your brethren, otherwise we will not be able to frighten them into submission. Rogash's breath misted as he let out a loud grunt. Iron-skinned men have many troll slaves, he growled. Rogash smash men to pieces, then trolls will join Iron Crown. The queen nodded slowly. How many slaves do they have? Rogash spread his arms. Many, he said. Rogash know no numbers. The Dark Queen pursed her lips. Rogash was a valuable weapon, but in many respects he was just a weapon. Strategy was made up for or by power in this brute. She would have to find a more suitable right hand eventually. For now, the troll would do. And that's the end of this section for today. I might read the rest
Nice.
of the prologue next week.
Very nice.
Very nice
Yeah,
troll
I like
voice.
it.
I'm definitely looking forward to this.
Yes.
I'm sorry to say though, every time you said like Dark Queen, I apologize. All I could think of was Lady Sylvanas.
Mm.
Not your fault, but not your fault. I just
World of
couldn't.
Warcraft is kind of ubiquitous at this point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a good troll voice. I have to admit.
Yeah.
I caught at least 2 Lord of the Rings references, I think.
Yes.
I think I heard 3. Agmar, Dunedain, Sauron.
Soren,
Soren.
Soran. It's actually Soren Markov from Magic the Gathering.
Oh, I thought it was Sylvan Kierkegaard.
Whenever I think of Soren, I think of one of the Fire Emblem characters, actually.
Or Way of
I
Kings.
think of the adorable little cinnamon roll from the Dragon Prince.
That is true. Okay, nice. Well, I am excited to chat about Way of Kings on Wednesday with Neph. And then,
Looking forward to it.
Yep. Thank you all. Hopefully this will convince you to read the book. Slight edits will be forthcoming in the next few weeks, just to kind of clean it up a little bit, add a little bit more prose. But anyway, I think we'll call it good for today. Thank you to my guests, Spark the Lightbulb, Akos, Neph Champion, Carl Sailor, and Tarek. I'm very glad that we could be able to read all of this today.
I'm glad I could be here.
Mhm.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, if anyone wants me to read anything, I'm more than happy to lend my voice to your story.
Nice.
Oh.
Now, man, I gotta read my stuff.
The offer stands.
I just want to say one thing, Dunn. This is truly the highlight of my week. I love coming here every Friday and being able to present. It's a lot of fun. I like being here.
It is. It motivates me to write. Actually.
Exactly. It motivates me to edit.
Well, that's good. I'm glad. And I'm glad that I could bring you guys on. I'm sorry that Count Valerian went to AFK or AWOL or whichever.
He died.
Died.
Yeah.
Well,
It's too bad. But just as well, since he was having technical difficulties last time he was on.
Right.
Like a lot of difficulties. Perhaps
Well, it
get
seems
that
as though-
fixed before.
it seems as though this one's.
He's dead.
Yes.
I see.
Yeah. Why is everything so sad? I don't know. We kind of are living in hell right now. So
Wasn't mine like not though?
no. Well, mine
wasn't sad. It was just
businesslike.
Mine just had a lot of death.
yeah.
Mine had
Yeah.
children suffering.
I would say I was pretty optimistic at the end.
Fair enough.
You know, mine's okay. Just a bunch of old white men planning the deaths of millions. You know, teenage boy stuff.
That's
Yeah.
any day that ends in Y.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine
Oh.
was basically the first 30 or
Oh,
so
you just heard the
minutes
last-
of Twilight Princess, so plus a little
Cool.
pre-game stuff.
Mhm. Well, hopefully Count Valerian will come next time, and we will hear more of his interesting names.
Yeah, and hopefully his technical difficulties will be a thing of the past too.
Hopefully. But
Well,
And
anyway,
maybe I become traumatized again.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, we will call it good for today. Thank you all, and adios.